They continue, and the Lord will continue to empower them because they love Mother Church and because they love you. I leave you with Bob and Penny Lord.
Yay. We love you.
Do you want us to cut it short?
We do love you.
We really love you.
See, we didn't know when we were doing the 25th anniversary. We knew Raymond Arroyo was up there making trouble, and he would speak in between each speaker. And when they announced us, he says, "Oh, Doug Keck is coming back now with Bob and Penny Lord. You know, we love you, we love you, we love you." We didn't know that at the time because we would have wrung his neck. Or Penny would have gotten up. She was going to get up and say, "My people, my people." That's what Raymond does.
But I'm glad that I didn't know. There's so many things you have to confess, right? Priests just shake their head when they see me coming toward them. Oh, this is going to be a long one.
It's going to be a long confession.
We had a wonderful, wonderful pastor in the next town in Mississippi when we lived in Louisiana.
Louisiana was so good that we had to go to Mississippi to go to church.
That's not it. We just... Did you hear that?
No, but he was a very good priest. He was
just
Catholic.
He was a little saint, and we'd go to confession to him, and he'd have us go to confession in the rectory, and he'd bring us into a room here, and the rest would be sitting in the living room, and you'd go in and confess with Father. So I went in, and as is not proper, Father and I would start to talk about the state of the church. And instead of just confining it to confession, we'd be going through all the woes of the church, and at one point there was a knock on the door.
And this is the door of the confessional. And she says,
and Father said, "Is it the Lord or Bob Lord?"
So we had to get her out because the four of us would go to confession. It would take three of us about half the time as it took her. And she doesn't ever commit any sin, so what is she talking about in there with our priest? And "Yes, Penny, yes, Penny."
One time our oldest daughter, Claire, went to confession, and in those days, would you believe people, there was a line, and I was standing on line, and she went in, and again, did the unforgivable, just talking and discussing things, and finally...
She would tell her whole life story every time.
And finally, I turned to everybody online. They all knew us and knew her from she was a little girl. I said, "I don't know her. Does anybody know who that is in there?"
They knew it was our daughter. Not this one, it was the other one.
The first time I disowned her was when she became 25. I said, "Now you're on your own, sweetheart, because I'm not getting older than 24.
We really want to keep on focus here. Our focus, of course, with defending and protecting the church. We've had a lot about the Muslims in the last 2 days, and so we just have a few things to end our talk on them. But then we want to share with you some of the defenders of the faith, saints that the Lord has given us in the period of the Reformation. And my darling wants to begin this with this very special thing that she wants to read to you.
Notice how we work together?
Now, you may have heard this before, men. For a perfect marriage, 3 things that you need for a perfect marriage. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I will never do it again. Perfect marriage.
And don't forget it.
So Penny's going to, because I was wrong, she's going to start.
Or if you ever see Bob, now I'll give you some of our hints. If you ever see Bob go like this, that means, okay, stop talking.
No, it's not stop talking, but there are times when she gets crazy and she's ready to scream at everybody, and I'm saying, Easy, easy does it.
We had, God forgive him, he's no longer...
Why are we doing all this?
Well, you brought it up. And he's no longer a priest, and he was our associate pastor in our old parish many years ago. And the little guy, I don't know whether it was the seminary or a snake bit him or something, but he was always spouting heresy. And so I'd say to Bob, I gotta go back there and talk to him. And he'd say, if you can speak with love. Speak with love. Anyway, in times of crisis, God sends us special grace. This grace may come from Eucharistic miracles, from apparitions from Mother Mary, from saints and other powerful men and women in the church. It may come in the form of angelic intercession. It will come from anywhere the Lord deems necessary. There is only one thing we can be assured: it will come. He will use whatever or whoever it takes, whenever it is needed, to protect us from anything or anyone who would bring us anywhere near the brink of hell. Very often, even if it means protecting us from ourselves.
Now, she didn't really, don't close the page. She didn't really need that book to tell us that. She knew all that, but she wants you to see the book. You really should have this book. This is why we do these things. You really have to have this book. Mother Angelica said,
my life's an open book.
This book.
I have no more secrets.
Okay, but there's one thing that I want to say from this book that I don't remember, so I want to say it from the book. It's on the same page. It says, there have been so many attacks on the church from without, from within, ongoing, overlapping. It's hard to believe that Satan could come up with so many variations on the same theme. These are some of the attacks we've had. You name it, we as a people of God have gone through it. That's an important point. We've gone through it. We haven't gone over it or under it. We haven't tried to go to the left or the right of it. We haven't avoided it like the plague. We've gone through it, and we're still here. That's one of the important things to tell you, because that's something that our saints are telling you there. With all the attacks on the church, we're here. We're still here. Our Pope, in this vision of Don Bosco, our Pope is shot. He dies. Another Pope is elected immediately to take his place. The church goes on. And although Pope John Paul II didn't die of a fatal wound, he died. Benedict XVI picked up, and our church continues.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
One day, I was having a real rough time, as usual, and I called up a dear friend of ours, Father Luther, convert to the faith from Church of Christ.
Actually, he's a descendant of Martin Luther.
And he's a canon lawyer, and he's a wonderful priest. Anyway, I call him up, and I know he can't do this, but that doesn't stop me anyway. I said, Father Luther, will you hear my confession on the phone? And he said, okay, girl, what's up now? And I started to tell him, about the things that are going on in the church. And you know how I was just despairing, Father. And he said, just a minute. He said, take it easy, girl. He said, it's been going on for 2,000 years. Now, we hadn't written this. We hadn't had an idea of writing this book. He said, the church, what you've known for the last 50 years, is unknown in the church. It's kind of been like a lull. He said, but the church...
period of peace.
Of peace.
That we have known in our... Now, you younger people, you haven't known it, but thus, white-haired, blue-haired people, we are aware that the period of time that we grew up in has been comparatively peaceful in the church.
He said, the church has always swung from the left to the right to the center.
Back to the middle again.
Always back to the one narrow road to the kingdom. And those words just stuck in our minds and hearts. And when New Age just completely went out of whack, we started to write on New Age. But I always have a habit of wanting to go to the beginning, to even before he walked.
Where did it come from?
And so I started at the beginning, Papa started at the end, and when we met in the middle, we came to the conclusion that what the heretics have been handing us, the attacks against our church, are just old heresies with new packaging.
Repackaged with a nice new bow on it.
New titles, but the same heresies. And that's important to know, that, as Bob said, we've been through it, and we're still here. And we will be here till the end of time, because when there is no longer a mass, who's going to be here? Jesus. Jesus. So we're going to be here a long time.
But just to follow up on that point, Penny started at Genesis, and where Father Anthony just left off with Adam saying, it's not my fault. What a cop-out. Anyway, she started with Genesis, I started with New Age. And Genesis is, you can be like God. New Age, you can be like God. We met in the middle, Renaissance, you can be like God. So what has changed over 2,000 years? It's still the same heresies.
The Mormons, you can be like God. One time, this dear lady, precious, precious lady, all the little old ladies loved my husband all the time. I wonder what it was.
I was a little cutesy.
She really loved him.
She was a very nice lady.
Mrs. Barton. So one night she calls up and she says, is Penny there? And she says, yeah. She says, well, put her on the extension. So I get on the phone and she said, listen to me, children. You've got to get, what is it?
Sealed
in the temple. She was a Mormon. And so Daddy's on the phone, and that's why everybody loved him. He's such a gentle soul. He doesn't act like it up here, but he really is gentle. And so she says, I want you to be together in heaven. And if you're not sealed in the temple, you won't be together. And so Bob said, do you think our Lord in his generosity would deny me out of ignorance entrance into the kingdom?
Was that nice? Was that nice?
Now, I wouldn't have put it quite that way, but Bob did. But she still was tearfully saying, please, you need to be sealed in the temple. Now, all of these things that the Mormons believe God loved them are based on old heresies, because there's only one truth, and that one truth came from the mouth of the Lord, which is the church.
I think you can come down just a little bit.
A little down?
Just, yeah, right about that.
You think about
Craig, where's Craig?
It's good down here?
Right about there. Is that good, Craig? Yeah, that's
good, Fred? Okay. Red, what?
Craig, I just want you to be, they're getting silly now.
Don't get her started. Do you ever see my daughter when she starts
Just
to laugh?
at the time,
That's
2
it.
years before Martin Luther came out with his 95 Theses that actually kicked off the Protestant Reformation, 2 saints of the Counter-Reformation were born, Teresa of Avila and Philip Neri. Powerful, powerful saints who fought tooth and nail against the Reformation. So see the way the Lord works. Teresa of Avila at one time said she was good in that she would never condemn people to hell. There are some people here who are always condemning people to hell. She said the last...
Only sometimes.
The last to get out of purgatory will be the followers of Martin Luther. So she at least let them go to purgatory. Penny would have said, they're going to hell. They're going straight to hell.
Okay, now that he opened his mouth. I didn't know that the Jehovah's Witnesses go out in a threesome. there is an older lady.
It's a plan, it's a plot, it's
and
a
then
track.
There's a young woman, and there's a child.
And that's the setup.
So I didn't know that. So it's Thanksgiving, and the way our home was in Southern California, there was this big picture window where the breakfast room was. So there we're sitting at the table, and this threesome comes on the porch. And I thought, what? I know that they're, evangelists of some kind, but coming out on Thanksgiving, So we went to the door, and I invited them in. Can I get you something to drink? And she said,
they don't walk in the door.
Yeah.
Especially not in our door, because our house was like Vatican West.
And she's looking
we
in,
had more statues
and you see
in our
this
house than in the church.
big cathedral ceiling, and that whole wall is everything of a religious nature. Paintings and the altar, and on the outside are tiles from Fatima. And she says, oh, you're just moving in? I said, no, we've been here many years. She said, well, I would just like to introduce you to our little magazine, The Watchtower. I said, oh, you're Jehovah's Witnesses? And so she said, well, she said, we would just like you to have that.
She said, are you Catholic? And we said, yes. And she says, and my husband used to be Catholic. See,
now, I didn't know that's another
part
line.
of the deal, that one of them, somebody had been Catholic at some time in their life before they became enlightened.
So I said to her, well, then tell your husband he's going to hell. I said, because he knows the difference. He knows that he's leaving Jesus Christ himself, body, blood, soul, and divinity. Not an organization, but the Lord himself. And she says, well, most Catholics don't know what you know.
No, she said, well, we don't believe.
Oh, yeah, we don't believe
that Jesus is God.
Is God. She said, and, most Catholics don't.
No.
No, wasn't it? Yeah.
So then you said.
No, it was after she. No, after
okay,
she said.
Okay.
You picture this on television? And so she says, most Catholics don't know what you know. And I said, well, then what you have to tell them is, first, go back and learn about your faith, and then I'll tell you really what we believe, and let them make a choice. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. And then she said, well, that's when she said, oh, well, most Catholics don't know what you know. And so I said to her.
No, and then she said, we don't believe that Jesus is God. And then you said, you're going to hell.
You're going to hell. So Bob said, in less than 5 minutes, she sent 2 people to hell.
In one day. In one day she did this. That's on a good day.
My daughter's looking at me like this. Did you have to tell them that?
I want to, Philip, we want to talk about these two. We want to talk about these 2 powerful saints of the. This whole book is about saints of the Counter-Reformation: Francis de Sales, Vincent de Paul, Charles Borromeo, Philip Neri, and Ignatius Loyola, Robert Bellamy. These were powerful saints who actually fought tooth and nail the Reformation, and whatever problems had existed in the church to bring about the Reformation, they actually fought to fix those problems and then to try to bring the church back together, but in any event, to discredit and eventually excommunicate all the heretics. In addition, we talk about the popes of the Counter-Reformation, especially St. Pius V, who went out of his way to make sure that he took over like where John Paul was. The Council of Trent condemned all the heretics, excommunicated the heretics, but it took St. Pius V to put together and put in force all the things of the Council of Trent, because nobody wanted to accept them. You had seminarians and you had teachers in seminaries teaching all the Protestant things. Well, they had to try and stop them, and the only way they could stop them is a new catechism, a list of forbidden books, all these things that had to be done in order to fight the Reformation. It was deeply ingrained in the church. So just the Council of Trent was just not enough.
Now, to set the record straight, and I know, again, we're preaching to the choir, but dogmas are not something new, okay? Dogmas are that which we have believed from the very beginning of the church, all right? We all set on that? But dogmas are proclaimed
And
when
defined.
when the church is attacked by a heresy. Okay, so sometimes it's almost a favor for them to attack us with a heresy, because then we proclaim and define a dogma.
But these are things that we have always believed in. We in the church, we just haven't put them down on paper because there was no need to. Everybody believed it.
Once a dogma is proclaimed by an ecumenical council. Now, what is an ecumenical council? I used to think it's ecumenical, you know? We have everybody in, all the Christians together, and we get together and have a vote. No, no, no. What it is His Holiness the Pope, in company with most of the bishops and cardinals of the world, when they declare something a dogma,
in an ecumenical council,
that's the period. At the end of the sentence, it's finished.
Now, to give you an example, in 1521 is when Luther came out with his heretical statements. It wasn't until 1562, 40 years later, that he was condemned, and Lutheranism was condemned, and Calvinism was condemned, because although the Pope Paul III condemned Luther and all of that, it wasn't done under an ecumenical council. And every time some pope would try to put together an ecumenical council, somebody would declare war, and usually the Germans. Sorry, guys, I know a lot of you are Germans here, but usually the Germans would declare war on one of the other countries, and they'd have to stop the council. It took them over 20 years, 40 years, to get the council actually convened and get all of the dogmas proclaimed and everybody, all the heretics, condemned. Took all that time because it was not under the auspices of an ecumenical council. They condemned it. Pope Paul III condemned all these things, but it didn't carry the strength that an ecumenical council would have. The only council that we've had in the history of the church that did not define dogma, did not condemn a heresy, was Vatican II.